Have you ever loved someone so much that you gave up everything for them only to wonder if they ever truly loved you back? Sometimes the people we sacrifice the most for are the ones who hurt us the deepest. My name is Margaret, and I'm about to tell you a story that will break your heart, but might also open your eyes to a truth many of us face. If this story touches you, please hit that like button and subscribe. It means the world to me knowing I'm not alone in this journey. I never thought I'd be sitting here at 68 years old, questioning everything I believed about my own son. But life has a way of surprising you, doesn't it? Sometimes those surprises feel like a knife to the chest. I'm Margaret Thompson, and I've lived in this same little house on Maple Street in Springfield, Missouri for over 30 years. The walls here have seen more tears than laughter lately, but they've also witnessed the greatest love story of my life, the love I had for my boy, David. You see, I became a mother when I was 24, and from the moment I held David in my arms, I knew my life had found its purpose. His father, my dear husband Robert, was a good man, but he worked long hours at the factory, and it was mostly just David and me during those early years. I didn't mind one bit. That boy was my sunshine, my reason for getting up every morning, my hope for the future. I worked as a nurse at Springfield General Hospital for 37 years. Long shifts, difficult patients, doctors who sometimes treated us nurses like we were invisible, but I never complained because every paycheck went toward giving David the best life I could provide. When other mothers were buying new dresses or getting their hair done fancy at the salon, I was putting that money aside for David's school supplies, his sports equipment, his college fund. Robert passed away 5 years ago from a heart attack. Sudden, unexpected, devastating. One day we were planning our retirement, talking about maybe taking that trip to Florida we'd always dreamed about, and the next day I was planning his funeral. David was 23 then, just graduated from college with a degree in business that cost me every penny of my savings and then some. I was proud. So incredibly proud. After Robert died, David became even more important to me. He was all I had left of the family we'd built together. Those first few months after the funeral were so dark, so lonely. The house felt too quiet, too empty. But David would come by every Sunday for dinner, and we'd talk about his new job at the insurance company, his plans for the future, his dreams. He'd hug me when he left and tell me he loved me, and for those precious moments I felt like maybe I could survive this grief. Then about 2 years ago David met Jessica. She seemed nice enough at first, pretty girl, well-dressed, worked as a secretary at some law firm downtown. She had this way of smiling that didn't quite reach her eyes, but I told myself I was just being an overprotective mother. David was in love, and that's all that mattered to me. I wanted my son to be happy, to find someone who would love him the way I did. When David told me he was going to propose to Jessica, I cried happy tears. Finally, I thought our little family was going to grow. I imagined holidays with grandchildren, Sunday dinners with more than just the two of us, maybe even having someone to help me tend to the little garden I'd been neglecting since Robert died. I started dreaming about being a grandmother, about having little ones call me Nana or Grandma Margaret. The wedding planning was where I first noticed the changes, though I didn't want to admit it at the time. Jessica had very specific ideas about everything, and those ideas never seemed to include me. When I offered to help pay for some of the wedding expenses, I had managed to save a little money from my pension. Jessica politely declined, saying they wanted to do everything themselves. When I suggested some traditions that Robert and I had at our wedding, she smiled that cold smile and said they wanted something more modern. But I brushed off these little hurts. I told myself that every new bride wants her wedding to be her own vision, and that was perfectly reasonable. I bought a lovely dress for the ceremony, had my hair done at the nicest salon in town, and showed up with a heart full of love and excitement. The wedding was beautiful, I have to admit. They had it at some fancy country club outside of town with flowers everywhere and a band that played music I didn't recognize but that made all the young people happy. During the reception I barely saw David. He was busy with his new wife, dancing and laughing with friends I didn't know. I sat at a table with some distant relatives, picking at my chicken dinner and watching my son start his new life. When it came time for the mother-son dance, David seemed almost embarrassed as he walked me to the dance floor. The song was short and he kept looking over at Jessica the whole time. "I'm so happy for you, sweetheart," I whispered to him as we swayed to the music. "Thanks, Mom," he said, but his voice sounded distracted, distant. After the wedding they went on a honeymoon to Mexico. 2 weeks of beaches and sunshine while I went back to my quiet house on Maple Street. I didn't mind, newlyweds needed time alone, I understood that. But when they came back something had shifted. The Sunday dinners stopped. When I called, David's answers were short, rushed. He was busy with work, he said. Jessica was redecorating their apartment, he said. They'd come by soon, he promised. Soon turned into a month, then 2 months, then 3. I started making excuses for them in my mind. Young couples need space to build their marriage, I told myself. They're starting their life together, and that's beautiful. But the loneliness was getting harder to bear. The house felt even quieter now, especially on Sundays when I'd cook a pot roast out of habit and then realize I was eating alone again. I tried reaching out to Jessica directly, thinking maybe we could have a nice lunch together, get to know each other better. I called her work number one afternoon and asked if she'd like to meet at that little cafe downtown that everyone said was so nice. "Oh, Mrs. Thompson," she said in that sweet voice that somehow managed to sound dismissive at the same time. "That's so thoughtful of you, but I'm just swamped with work and wedding thank you notes and getting our home just right. Maybe sometime soon." Sometime soon never came, of course. The thank you notes got finished, I'm sure, but the lunch invitation was forgotten. I started to wonder if I'd done something wrong, said something at the wedding that offended her. I replayed every conversation we'd ever had, looking for some mistake I might have made. Christmas that year was particularly hard. I'd always hosted Christmas dinner. It was my favorite tradition. Robert and I would spend days preparing, making his mother's famous stuffing recipe, baking pies, decorating the house with lights and garland. After Robert died, David and I had still kept the tradition alive, just the two of us, but it was still Christmas. That December I called David in early November to talk about our plans. "Should I get a turkey or a ham this year, honey? And does Jessica have any special dishes she'd like me to make?" There was a pause on the other end of the line that lasted too long. "Actually, Mom, we're going to Jessica's parents' house this year. Her mom really wanted to host, and you know how mothers can be." I felt like someone had punched me in the stomach, but I tried to keep my voice steady. "Of course, sweetheart. That's wonderful. Her mother must be so excited. Maybe I could come by on Christmas Eve, or the day after Christmas. We'll see how things go, Mom. The holidays are just so crazy, you know." I spent Christmas Day alone for the first time in my life. I didn't even cook a proper meal, just heated up some soup and watched old movies on television. I kept thinking about all the Christmases when David was little, how his eyes would light up when he saw the presents under the tree, how he'd wake me up at dawn because he was too excited to wait any longer. Where had that little boy gone? When had my loving son become this stranger who couldn't spare an afternoon for his mother on Christmas? New Year's came and went without a word from David. I started to worry that something was seriously wrong. Maybe they were having marriage problems and he was too proud to tell me. Maybe Jessica was sick and he was too worried to burden me with the news. Maybe his job was in trouble and he was embarrassed. I convinced myself that there had to be some explanation for this silence, this distance. In February, I decided to drive by their apartment building, just to see if everything looked normal. I wasn't planning to stop or bother them. I just needed to see with my own eyes that they were okay. As I sat in my car across the street, I saw them coming out together, laughing about something, looking perfectly happy and healthy. David was carrying grocery bags and Jessica was holding his free arm, smiling up at him like he'd just told the funniest joke in the world. They looked so content, so complete without me. I sat there watching them load groceries into David's car, the car I'd helped him buy when he graduated college, and I realized that I wasn't missing from their life because something was wrong. I was missing because they didn't want me there. That night, I cried harder than I had since Robert's funeral. All those years of sacrifice, all those times I'd chosen David's needs over my own wants, all those dreams I'd put aside to make sure he had every opportunity, and this was how it ended. With me sitting alone in my car like some kind of stalker watching my son live a life that had no room for his mother. But even then, even with my heart breaking into 1,000 pieces, I still made excuses for him. Marriage changes people, I told myself. He's just trying to be a good husband, putting his wife first like a man should. This is temporary, I convinced myself. Once they settle into married life, once they maybe start thinking about having children, David will remember how much family means. He'll come back to me. I held on to that hope like it was a lifeline because without it I had nothing left. My son was my whole world, my entire purpose, my greatest achievement. If I lost him, what would be left of Margaret Thompson? Just an old woman in an empty house, with nothing but memories and regrets to keep her company. Little did I know that the worst was yet to come, and that the son I'd loved more than my own life was about to show me just how little that love had ever meant to him. Spring came to Springfield that year, but it brought no renewal to my heart. The flowers in my little garden bloomed just like they always had, but I barely noticed them. I was too busy watching my phone, waiting for calls that never came, checking my mailbox for invitations that were never sent. If you're watching this and you've ever felt forgotten by someone you love, please know you're not alone. Hit that subscribe button if this story is speaking to your heart. It was in March when I learned about David's promotion at the insurance company. Not from David himself, mind you, but from Mrs. Patterson, who lived 3 houses down from me. Her daughter worked at the same company and she mentioned it while we were both getting our mail one Tuesday morning. "Oh, Margaret," she said with that sympathetic smile that made my stomach turn, "isn't it wonderful about David's promotion?" "Regional manager," my Sarah said. "Such a big achievement for someone so young." I stood there holding a stack of bills and junk mail, trying to process what she'd just told me. My son had gotten a promotion, a big promotion, and I had to hear about it from a neighbor. I managed to smile and nod, mumbling something about being so proud of him, but inside I felt like I was crumbling. That evening I called David to congratulate him. When he finally answered on the 4th ring, his voice sounded tired and distant. "Hi, Mom. What's up?" "Honey, I heard about your promotion. Regional manager. That's incredible. I'm so proud of you." There was a pause that lasted too long. "Oh, right. Yeah, it happened a few weeks ago." "Thanks." A few weeks ago. He'd known for weeks and never thought to call his mother. The woman who'd worked double shifts to put him through college, who'd gone without so many things so he could have everything he needed. "David, this is such wonderful news. Maybe we could celebrate? I could take you and Jessica out to dinner at that steakhouse you used to love, the one where we celebrated your graduation." "That's nice of you to offer, Mom, but we're really swamped right now. The new position has me traveling a lot, and Jessica's been dealing with some family stuff of her own." Family stuff of her own. The words stung because I realized that to David I wasn't part of his family anymore. I was just his mother, someone from his past, not someone in his present. "Of course, sweetheart. I understand. Maybe some other time." "Yeah, maybe. Listen, Mom, I've got to run. Jessica's calling me for dinner." He hung up before I could say I loved him. I sat there holding the phone until the dial tone became unbearable, then I set it down and stared at the wall for a long time. The house felt colder that night, even though spring was supposed to be warming things up. 2 weeks later, I made a decision that I knew was risky, but I couldn't help myself. I drove to David's office building downtown. I wasn't going to bother him at work. I just wanted to see him, maybe catch him on his lunch break and suggest we grab a sandwich together like we used to do sometimes when he first started working there. I parked across the street and waited. At 12:30 I saw him come out of the building, but he wasn't alone. Jessica was with him, which surprised me since her law firm was on the other side of town. They were walking close together and David was carrying a large manila envelope. They went into a restaurant that looked expensive. Definitely not the kind of place for a quick lunch break. I sat in my car for over an hour waiting for them to come out. When they finally did, they looked serious, almost troubled. David kept looking at that envelope and Jessica was talking animatedly, gesturing with her hands like she did when she was upset about something. They walked back toward David's building, but then stopped at the corner and talked for several more minutes. I couldn't hear what they were saying, but I could see the tension in both their faces. Something was happening. Something important enough for Jessica to leave her own job in the middle of the day to meet with David. Something that required whatever was in that envelope. I wanted so badly to walk over there to ask if everything was okay, to offer help if they needed it. But I knew I wasn't welcome. I was just an observer now, watching my son's life from a distance like a stranger. That night I couldn't stop thinking about what I'd seen. I called David again, trying to sound casual. "Hi, honey. How was your day?" "Fine, Mom. Just the usual work stuff." "That's good. I was downtown today and thought I saw you coming out of that nice restaurant on 4th Street. The one with the red awnings." Another long pause. I could practically hear him thinking, trying to figure out what to say. "Yeah, I had a business lunch. Client meeting." He was lying to me. I knew it as surely as I knew my own name. David had never been a good liar, even as a child. His voice got that same careful tone it used to get when he was 7 years old and trying to convince me he hadn't broken my favorite lamp. "Oh, that's nice. Was it a good meeting?" "Yeah, it went well. Listen, Mom, I'm really tired tonight. Can we talk later this week?" "Of course, sweetheart. Get some rest. I love you. Good night." He hung up without saying he loved me back. He used to always say it back automatically like breathing. Now even those 3 little words seemed too much trouble for him. April brought more distance, more silence. I started marking the days on my calendar, not the days he called but the days he didn't. The unmarked days began to outnumber the marked ones by such a wide margin that I stopped keeping track altogether. It was too depressing. I tried a different approach. Instead of calling David directly, I started sending him little care packages. Cookies I'd baked, his favorite chocolate chip recipe that I'd been making since he was 5 years old. A new tie for his important new job. A book about business success that I'd seen at the library and thought he might enjoy. I'd leave cheerful little notes with each package. Thinking of you, sweetheart. And, so proud of my successful son. And hope you and Jessica are doing well. The packages disappeared from their apartment building's mailroom, so I knew they were receiving them. But David never called to thank me, never mentioned them at all. It was like I was sending care packages into a black hole. In May, I decided to try reaching out to Jessica again. Maybe if I could connect with her, build some kind of relationship, she might help me understand what was happening with David. Maybe she could be the bridge I needed to get back into my son's life. I called her work number again, choosing my words carefully before I dialed. Hi Jessica. It's Margaret, David's mother. How are you doing, dear? Oh hi Mrs. Thompson. I'm fine, thank you. Just busy with work. I was wondering if you might have time for lunch this weekend. There's a lovely little place called Rosie's Cafe that just opened near the mall. My friend Eleanor says their salads are wonderful. Jessica's voice became even more formal, if that was possible. That's very kind of you to ask, Mrs. Thompson, but weekends are really the only time David and I have together, you know? With his new position keeping him so busy during the week. Of course I understand. Maybe a weekday evening? Or I could cook dinner for both of you. I haven't had the chance to cook for David in so long. We're just so busy right now with work and some family matters we're dealing with. Maybe once things settle down. Those family matters again. The ones that apparently didn't include David's actual family, meaning me. Is everything okay, Jessica? If there's anything I can help with. Everything's fine, Mrs. Thompson. We're just working through some things. Adult things, you know. Adult things. Like I wasn't an adult myself. Like I hadn't been an adult longer than she'd been alive. Like I hadn't raised David from a baby to a man, handling plenty of adult things along the way. Well, if you need anything at all, please don't hesitate to call. I'm always here for both of you. That's nice. I should probably get back to work now. Take care. She hung up and I sat there feeling smaller than I had in years. Jessica's message was crystal clear. I was not wanted, not needed, not welcome in their world of adult things and family matters. June brought the cruelest blow yet. I learned about it the same way I'd learned about David's promotion from a neighbor. This time it was Mrs. Chin from next door who mentioned it while we were both watering our gardens one evening. Margaret, I saw the most beautiful pictures on my granddaughter's Facebook. She's friends with your David, you know, from high school. Did you have a wonderful time at their housewarming party? My watering can slipped from my hands and hit the ground with a metallic clang. Water soaked into the dirt around my tomato plants while I stared at Mrs. Housewarming party? Oh yes, last weekend. Such a lovely house they bought. 2 stories, big yard, perfect for children someday. The pictures showed so many people there, looked like quite a celebration. David and Jessica had bought a house. Had a housewarming party. Invited what looked like dozens of people. And I hadn't even known they were house hunting, let alone that they'd found a place and moved and celebrated with everyone they cared about. Everyone except me. That night I did something I'd never done before. I looked up David on the internet, on that Facebook thing Mrs. Chin had mentioned. I'd always thought computers and social media were too complicated for me, but desperation is a powerful teacher. I went to the library the next day and asked the young librarian to help me. There it was, David's profile filled with pictures of their new life. Photos of him and Jessica in front of a beautiful 2-story house with a red door and flower boxes under the windows. Pictures from the housewarming party. David laughing with friends I didn't recognize, Jessica showing off what looked like expensive furniture. Both of them looking happier than I'd seen them look in any of the few photos they'd shared with me from their wedding. I scrolled through months of posts, seeing glimpses of the life my son was living without me. Dinners at restaurants, weekend trips to places I'd never heard of, celebrations and achievements and ordinary moments that made up a life I wasn't part of anymore. Not a single photo included me. Not one mention of his mother, his family, his past. It was like I didn't exist, like I never had existed. Like David Thompson had sprung into the world fully formed at age 28, with no history, no mother who'd loved him and raised him and sacrificed everything for his happiness. I closed the computer and walked out of the library in a daze. The young librarian called after me, asking if I was finished, but I couldn't speak. I sat in my car in the parking lot and cried until I had no tears left. That evening I called David one more time. I didn't plan what I was going to say, the words just came pouring out. David, honey, it's Mom. I know you're busy and I don't want to be a bother, but I'm confused about some things. Mrs. Chin mentioned that you and Jessica bought a house and I don't understand why you didn't tell me. I would have loved to help you celebrate or at least know that you were moving. I'm your mother, sweetheart. I want to be part of your life, part of your happiness. My voice was shaking by the end and I knew he could hear how upset I was. Mom. His voice was different now, harder than I'd ever heard it. Look, I'm going to be straight with you. Jessica and I are building our own life together. We're adults and we need space to do that. We can't have you calling all the time and wanting to be involved in every little thing we do. Every little thing. Buying a house was a little thing. Getting promoted was a little thing. I was asking to be involved in little things. David, I'm not trying to interfere. I just want to be part of your family. You're all I have left in this world. That's not my responsibility, Mom. I can't be your whole world. It's not healthy and it's not fair to Jessica and me. Not his responsibility. I thought about all the nights I'd stayed up with him when he was sick, all the times I'd chosen his needs over my own wants, all the dreams I'd set aside to make sure he had every opportunity. None of that had been my responsibility either. It had been my love. I understand that you need your space, honey. I just want to know that I still matter to you, that I'm still your mother. Of course you're still my mother, but that doesn't mean things can stay the way they used to be. Jessica and I are starting fresh, building something new. We need to focus on our future, not constantly look back to the past. The past. That's what I was to him now. Not his present, certainly not his future. Just his past, something to be left behind as he moved forward into his new life. Hey David. I hear what you're saying. I'll try to give you more space. Good. Thanks, Mom. I have to go now. Jessica's waiting for me. He hung up and I knew that something fundamental had shifted between us. This wasn't just about needing space or being busy with a new marriage. This was about David choosing to cut me out of his life, deliberately and permanently. But even then, even after that devastating phone call, I still wasn't ready to face the full truth. I still believed that somewhere inside the man who'd spoken to me so coldly was the little boy who used to crawl into my bed during thunderstorms, who used to make me Mother's Day cards with construction paper and glue, who used to tell me I was the best mom in the whole world. I still believed that love would win in the end, that family meant something, that all those years of devotion had to count for something. I had no idea how wrong I was or how much worse things were about to get. The son I thought I knew, the boy I'd raised with such love and hope, was about to show me exactly what he really thought of his mother and all her sacrifices. And when he did, the truth would be more devastating than anything I could have imagined. July in Missouri is hot and humid, but nothing prepared me for the heat of the anger that was building inside my chest. For weeks after that last phone call with David, I'd been trying to convince myself to just let things be, to give him the space he said he needed. But the silence was eating me alive. 3 months had passed without seeing my son, without a real conversation, without feeling like I mattered to anyone in this world. If you've ever felt invisible to the people you love most, you'll understand what I'm about to tell you. And if this story is touching your heart, please don't forget to hit that like button. I'd been driving past their new house every few days, just to feel connected somehow. It was a beautiful place on Elm Street, about 15 minutes from my little house. 2 stories just like Mrs. Chin had said, with a manicured lawn and flower beds that were clearly professionally maintained. There was a new BMW in the driveway, not the modest Honda I'd helped David buy after college, but something expensive and shiny. On a Tuesday morning in mid-July, I made a decision that would change everything. I was going to go to that house and have an honest conversation with my son. No phone calls that could be cut short, no excuses about being busy or tired. I was going to look David in the eye and ask him directly what had happened to us, to the relationship we used to have, to the love that had once been the center of both our worlds. I spent an hour getting ready, choosing a nice blue dress that David had always said brought out my eyes, doing my hair the way I used to when he was little and would tell me I looked pretty. I wanted to remind him of the mother he used to love, the woman who had been his whole world just as he had been mine. The drive to Elm Street felt like the longest 15 minutes of my life. My hands were shaking on the steering wheel and I kept rehearsing what I would say. I would be calm, loving, understanding. I would listen to his concerns and find a way to rebuild our relationship. I would not cry no matter what he said. I would be the strong mother he needed me to be. Their house looked even more impressive up close. The lawn was perfect, not a single weed or brown patch. The flower boxes under the windows were filled with colorful blooms that must have cost a fortune. This was clearly the home of people who had money, more money than David's salary should have provided, even with his promotion. I rang the doorbell and heard footsteps inside. My heart was pounding so hard I thought it might burst right out of my chest. The door opened and there was Jessica, dressed in an expensive-looking white blouse and navy slacks, her hair styled perfectly even though it was barely 10 in the morning. Her face went through a series of expressions when she saw me: surprise, annoyance, and something that looked almost like panic. "Mrs. Thompson," she said, not opening the door any wider. "What are you doing here?" "Hello, Jessica. I was hoping to talk to David. Is he home?" "He's working from home today, but he's very busy. He has important calls scheduled all morning." "I don't mind waiting," I said, trying to keep my voice pleasant. "I haven't seen my son in months. I'm sure he can spare a few minutes for his mother." Jessica's grip on the door tightened. "This really isn't a good time. Maybe you should call first next time." Next time? Like I was some unwelcome salesperson instead of David's mother. "Jessica, I did call. Many times. But David never seems to have time to talk anymore. I'm starting to worry that something's wrong, that maybe he's upset with me about something. I just want to understand." From somewhere inside the house I heard David's voice calling out, "Jess? Who's at the door?" Before Jessica could answer I called back, "It's me, David. It's your mother." The silence that followed was deafening. I could practically feel the tension radiating from Jessica, and I heard David's footsteps approaching, slow and reluctant. He appeared behind Jessica, wearing a polo shirt and khaki pants that looked more expensive than anything I'd ever seen him wear before. His hair was styled differently, shorter and more sophisticated. He looked successful, prosperous, like a man who had truly made something of himself. He also looked like he'd rather see anyone in the world other than me standing on his doorstep. "Hi, Mom," he said, his voice carefully neutral. "What's going on?" "I came to see you, honey. To talk. We haven't had a real conversation in so long and I miss you." "I miss us." David glanced at Jessica and some kind of silent communication passed between them. She stepped back slightly but didn't leave his side. "Mom, I told you we've been busy. The new housework, getting settled. I can see the house is beautiful, sweetheart. You must be so proud. I wish you'd told me you were house hunting. I could have helped or at least celebrated with you." "We handled it fine on our own," Jessica interjected, her voice sharp. I looked at her, surprised by the hostility in her tone. "I'm sure you did, dear. But David is my son. I've been part of every major milestone in his life. I just don't understand why this one had to be different." "Because we're adults now," David said, crossing his arms. "We don't need to involve our parents in every decision we make." "Our parents. Not you, Mom. Our parents." Like I was just another interfering in-law instead of the woman who'd raised him single-handedly for most of his childhood. "David, I'm not trying to interfere. I just want to be part of your life. You're all the family I have left since your father died." "That's not my problem, Mom." The words hit me like a physical blow. "That's not my problem. My loneliness, my grief, my need to stay connected to the son I'd devoted my life to raising, none of it was his problem." "Excuse me." I said, "It's not my problem. You can't expect me to be responsible for your happiness. That's not fair to me or Jessica. I'm not asking you to be responsible for my happiness, David. I'm asking you to be my son. To care about me the way I care about you. To include me in your life instead of shutting me out completely." Jessica stepped forward. "Mrs. Thompson, maybe it would be better if you called before coming over. We have a lot going on right now." "What exactly do you have going on that's so important you can't spare an hour for David's mother?" The words came out sharper than I'd intended, but I was tired of being polite while they treated me like garbage. David's face darkened. "Don't talk to my wife that way." I wasn't being rude to Jessica. I was asking a legitimate question. What is so important in your lives that there's no room for family? You want to know what's so important? David's voice was rising now, and I could see anger flashing in his eyes, anger that seemed way out of proportion to what we were discussing. Fine. I'll tell you. We're trying to build a future here, Mom. A real future with goals and plans and financial security. We don't have time to hold your hand every time you feel lonely. David. I was shocked by his tone, by the cruelty in his words. I'm not asking you to hold my hand. I'm asking you to be my family. Family. He laughed, but there was no humor in it. You want to talk about family? Let me tell you something about family, Mom. Family doesn't guilt trip each other. Family doesn't show up uninvited and demand attention. Family respects boundaries. What boundaries? When did you ever tell me there were boundaries? When did you ever sit down with me and explain what you needed instead of just disappearing from my life? I shouldn't have to explain basic social concepts to a grown woman, Mom. Most people understand that when someone stops calling, stops visiting, stops including you in things, it means they need space. The casual cruelty of his words took my breath away. So you were intentionally hurting me? All these months of silence, of exclusion, of making me feel like I didn't matter, that was all deliberate. It wasn't about hurting you. It was about Jessica and me having the freedom to live our lives without constant interference. Interference? David, I sent you cookies. I called to congratulate you on your promotion. I asked to take you to dinner. How is any of that interference? Jessica stepped closer to David, placing her hand on his arm like she was supporting him through some terrible ordeal. Mrs. Thompson, maybe you don't realize how overwhelming it can be when someone calls all the time, sends packages constantly, wants to be included in everything. We're newlyweds. We need space to build our marriage. I called maybe once a week, Jessica. I sent 3 packages in 6 months. And I asked to be included in things like buying a house and getting promoted, major life events that most mothers would naturally be part of. Well, maybe that's the problem right there, David said, his voice getting colder by the second. This idea that you should naturally be part of everything. Jessica is my family now. He's my priority. Her needs come first, not yours. I felt something crack inside my chest. David, I'm not competing with Jessica. I don't want to come first. I just want to matter. I just want to know that all those years of loving you, all those sacrifices I made, all that time and energy and devotion meant something to you. Oh, here we go with the sacrifices again, David said, rolling his eyes. You know what, Mom? Nobody asked you to sacrifice anything. Nobody forced you to work double shifts or go without things. You made those choices. That doesn't mean I owe you my entire adult life in return. The world seemed to tilt around me. I didn't make those choices because I thought you owed me something, David. I made them because I loved you. Because you were my son and I wanted to give you every opportunity in life. And I appreciate that, I really do. But appreciation doesn't mean I have to let you control my life forever. Control your life? How am I trying to control your life? By expecting to be involved in every decision, every milestone, every moment. By making me feel guilty when I don't call. By showing up here uninvited and acting like I'm some kind of monster for wanting privacy in my own home. I looked at my son, this stranger who was wearing David's face but speaking like someone I'd never met, and I felt the last of my hope crumbling away. David, I love you. I have loved you since the moment you were born. Every decision I've made for the past 28 years has been about making sure you were happy, healthy, and successful. I don't understand how that love became such a burden to you. It became a burden when it came with strings attached, Mom. When it came with expectations and demands and guilt trips. Real love doesn't require constant contact and involvement. Real love means letting people live their own lives. So if I really loved you, I'd disappear completely? I'd pretend I never had a son, never raised you, never mattered to you at all? David was quiet for a moment and I thought maybe I'd finally gotten through to him. Maybe he was seeing how cruel he was being. Then he looked me straight in the eye and said the words that would haunt me for the rest of my life. You know what, Mom? Yes. If you really loved me, you'd understand that you're not part of this family anymore. You never really were part of my family. You were just the person who raised me until I could take care of myself. Now I can. Now I have Jessica and we're building something together that doesn't include you. You need to accept that and move on with your own life instead of trying to live through mine. The silence that followed was complete. Even the birds seemed to have stopped singing. Jessica was staring at the ground, apparently fascinated by her expensive shoes. David was looking at me with a mixture of defiance and something that might have been relief, like he'd finally said what he'd been thinking for months. I stood there on their perfect front porch in my nice blue dress, feeling like someone had reached into my chest and ripped out my heart with their bare hands. "You don't mean that," I whispered. "I do mean it, Mom. I'm sorry if it hurts, but it's the truth. You're not part of this family. You're not part of my life anymore. The sooner you accept that, the better it'll be for everyone." But then David kept talking, and what came out of his mouth next changed everything. In his anger, in his desire to hurt me as much as possible, he revealed far more than he intended to. "Besides, it's not like you'll be alone much longer anyway. We've already started looking into some really nice places for you. Assisted living facilities where you can make friends your own age and have people to take care of you. Jessica found some great options that are actually pretty affordable, especially once we sell your house and use that money for the monthly fees." The words hit me like a freight train. "What did you just say?" David's face went white as he realized what he'd just revealed. Jessica grabbed his arm and said, "David, don't." But it was too late. The truth was out and there was no taking it back. "You've been planning to put me in a nursing home? And sell my house? The house your father and I bought together, the house where I raised you, the house where all our memories are." "Mom, it's not like that." "Then what is it like, David? Explain to me exactly what it's like." Jessica tried to step between us. "Mrs. Thompson, maybe we should discuss this another time when everyone's calmer." "No," I said, my voice stronger than it had been in months. "We're discussing this right now. David, I want you to tell me exactly what you and your wife have been planning for my future." David looked trapped, angry, and desperate all at once. "Fine. You want the truth? Here's the truth. Jessica and I have been talking about what's going to happen as you get older. You're already showing signs that you can't really take care of yourself properly." "What signs?" "The house is a mess, Mom. The yard is overgrown. You're clearly not eating well or taking care of your health. You're isolated and depressed and calling me constantly because you have no life of your own." Each word was a dagger, but I forced myself to stay standing to keep listening. "So we started looking into options. Good places, nice places where you'd have meals prepared for you and activities and medical care if you need it. And yes, we'd have to sell the house to pay for it, but that makes sense anyway. It's too big for you, too much work, and frankly it's worth a lot more now than when Dad bought it. You've been planning this behind my back. Planning to warehouse me somewhere so I won't be an inconvenience to your perfect new life. It's not warehousing, Mom. It's practical planning for your future care." "My future care? David, I'm 68 years old, not 98. I'm perfectly capable of taking care of myself. I worked as a nurse for 37 years. I think I know a little bit about health and self-care." "Do you? Because from where I'm standing, you seem pretty lost and dependent." The cruelty in his voice was breathtaking. This was my son, the boy I'd rocked to sleep every night for years, the child I'd nursed through every illness, the young man I'd cheered for at every graduation and achievement. "David, I want you to listen to me very carefully. I am not lost, I am not dependent, and I am not going into any assisted living facility. That house is my home. Your father and I paid for it with our own money, our own sweat and sacrifice. It's mine, not yours, and you have no right to make plans for it." "Actually, Mom, I do have the right. The house was transferred to my name 3 years ago when Dad was worried about estate taxes, remember? Technically, it's already mine." The final blow. The house. My sanctuary, my memories, the place where I'd raised my child and buried my husband's ashes in the garden, wasn't even legally mine anymore. I looked at David and Jessica standing there on their perfect porch. These two people who had been planning to dispose of me like an unwanted piece of furniture, and I finally saw them clearly for the first time. "You're right about one thing, David," I said, my voice steady now despite the devastation in my heart. "You're not my family anymore. Family doesn't treat each other the way you've treated me. Family doesn't make secret plans to get rid of each other. And family sure doesn't stand on their front porch and tell someone who loved them more than life itself that they never mattered at all." I turned to walk back to my car, but David's voice stopped me. "Mom, wait. Look, maybe I said some things I didn't mean." I turned back to face him one last time. "No, David. You said exactly what you meant. You've been planning this for months, maybe years. The distance, the silence, the exclusion, it was all leading up to this moment when you could finally be free of the burden of having a mother who loves you. That's not I never said you were a burden. You didn't have to say it, sweetheart. Every action, every word, every choice you've made has shown me exactly how much of a burden I am to you. Well, congratulations. You're about to get exactly what you want. You won't be hearing from me anymore. I walked to my car with as much dignity as I could manage, got inside and drove away from that beautiful house on Elm Street. In my rearview mirror, I could see David and Jessica still standing on their porch watching me go. As I drove home through the streets of Springfield, past all the familiar places where I'd lived my entire adult life, I realized that everything I thought I knew about my son, about our relationship, about the meaning of all those years of love and sacrifice had been a lie. The boy I'd loved more than my own life had grown into a man who saw me as nothing more than an obstacle to his happiness. And now that I knew the truth, I had some very important decisions to make about what came next. I drove home from that confrontation with my hands shaking on the steering wheel and my heart completely shattered. But somewhere between David's house and mine, something started to change inside me. The tears stopped coming, and in their place came something I hadn't felt in months: clarity. If you've been following this story and it's helped you understand your own family struggles, please take a moment to subscribe and share it with someone who might need to hear it. Sometimes the most painful truths are the ones that set us free. When I walked into my little house on Maple Street that afternoon, I saw it through different eyes. David had called it a mess, said the yard was overgrown, claimed I couldn't take care of myself. I looked around with fresh perspective, trying to see what he saw. Yes, there were some dishes in the sink from breakfast. Yes, I hadn't vacuumed in a few days. The garden needed weeding and the grass could use cutting. But this wasn't the home of someone who couldn't care for herself. This was the home of someone who'd been too heartbroken to care about housework while grieving the loss of her son's love. I spent that evening doing something I hadn't done in years. I really looked at my financial situation, not just the day-to-day bills, but everything. My pension from the hospital, my social security, the small life insurance policy Robert had left me, and yes, the value of the house that was now legally David's but had been built with decades of my and Robert's hard work. What I discovered surprised me. I wasn't poor. I wasn't helpless. I wasn't dependent on David for anything except love, and that was the one thing he was unwilling to give. Without his expensive tastes, his need for luxury cars and perfect landscaping and designer clothes, I actually had enough money to live quite comfortably on my own. The next morning I did something I'd never thought I'd have to do. I called a lawyer. Eleanor Patterson had mentioned once that her nephew was an attorney who specialized in elder law and family issues. I made an appointment for that very afternoon. Attorney Michael Patterson was a kind man in his 40s who listened patiently while I explained my situation. When I finished, he leaned back in his chair and shook his head. "Mrs. Thompson, I'm sorry you're going through this. But I have some good news and some challenging news. The challenging news is that yes, if the house was legally transferred to your son 3 years ago, it is technically his property now. However, the good news is that as long as you're living there and have been paying the taxes and maintenance, you have what we call life estate rights in many circumstances." What does that mean exactly? It means that even though David owns the house on paper, he can't just evict you or force you into a care facility against your will. You have legal rights as a long-term resident, especially since you've been maintaining the property. More importantly, though, I think we need to look at the circumstances under which that transfer was made. He asked me to bring in all the paperwork from when Robert was sick, when we'd made the transfer. It took me 2 days to find everything, buried in the filing cabinet that I hadn't touched since Robert's death. When I returned to Mr. Patterson's office with the documents, he spent a long time reading through them. Finally, he looked up at me with a serious expression. "Mrs. Thompson, this transfer was made specifically to avoid estate taxes and to ensure that you could continue living in the home for the rest of your life. There's actually a clause in here that states the property reverts to you if David ever attempts to sell it or remove you from it without your consent. Your husband was a very smart man." I felt Robert's presence in that moment, like he was still protecting me even from beyond the grave. "So David can't force me out?" "Not legally, no. And if he tries, we can challenge the entire transfer based on these documents." "But Mrs. Thompson, I have to ask, do you really want to stay in a house that's caused this much family conflict? Sometimes the best victory is walking away on your own terms." That night, I sat in the kitchen where I'd fed David thousands of meals, where I'd helped him with homework, where I'd listened to his problems and celebrated his achievements. I thought about Mr. Patterson's question. Did I want to stay in a house full of memories of a son who no longer existed? The answer came to me slowly but with absolute certainty. I didn't want to stay and fight for a house that David saw as his investment property. I didn't want to spend my remaining years surrounded by reminders of how naive I'd been about his love. I wanted something entirely different. I wanted a life that was mine alone, built on my own choices, filled with people who actually wanted me around. The next week I did something that would have terrified me 6 months earlier. I drove to the office of Springfield's most successful real estate agent and listed my house for sale. Not David's house. My house, because as it turned out, those documents gave me the right to sell it and keep the proceeds as long as I was acting in my own best interests and not being coerced. When David found out, and he found out quickly because Springfield is a small town, he called me for the first time in weeks. His voice was panicked, angry, and desperate all at once. "Mom, what the hell are you doing? You can't sell that house." "Actually, David, I can. I've spoken with a lawyer, and the documents your father and I signed give me full rights to sell the property if I choose to relocate. Which I do. Where are you going to go? You don't have anywhere else to live." The concern in his voice might have touched me once, but now I could hear what was really behind it. He wasn't worried about where I would live. He was worried about losing his investment property. "I'm moving to Arizona, David. I've put a deposit on a lovely little condo in a community outside Phoenix. It has a pool, a clubhouse, organized activities, and it's full of people my own age who actually enjoy each other's company." "Arizona? Mom, you don't know anyone in Arizona." "I don't really know anyone in Missouri anymore either, sweetheart. At least in Arizona I'll be starting fresh with people who might actually want to be my friends." "You're being ridiculous. You're 68 years old. You can't just uproot your entire life and move across the country." "Watch me." There was a long pause. Then David's voice changed, became the manipulative tone I was finally learning to recognize. "Mom, look, maybe we both said some things we didn't mean the other day. Maybe we can work this out. You don't need to sell the house. We can figure something else out." "What kind of something else, David?" "The kind where you put me in a nursing home and visit me once a month out of obligation." "I never said nursing home. I said assisted living. There's a difference. The difference is that I don't need either one. What I need is a son who loves me, and since that's apparently not available, I'm making other arrangements." "Of course I love you, Mom. You're my mother." "No, David. You love the idea of me when it's convenient. You love having a mother when you need something or when it makes you look good. But you don't love me enough to include me in your life, to treat me with respect, or to consider my feelings when you make plans for my future. That's not fair. What's not fair is a son who secretly plans to dispose of his mother like unwanted furniture. What's not fair is months of silence and exclusion while you build a life that has no room for the woman who sacrificed everything for you. What's not fair is standing on your porch and telling me I was never part of your family." I could hear Jessica's voice in the background, but I couldn't make out the words. "Mom, Jessica thinks maybe we should all sit down and talk about this calmly." "Jessica thinks?" "David, 3 days ago Jessica was helping you pick out nursing homes for me. Now she wants to talk? The only reason either of you wants to talk now is because you've realized that my moving to Arizona and selling this house means you lose your financial safety net." "That's not true." But it was true and we both knew it. The house was worth almost $300,000 now. Money that David had been counting on, planning for, seeing as his inheritance that he could access by putting me away somewhere cheap. "David, let me make something very clear to you. I'm selling this house and I'm moving to Arizona. The money from the sale will pay for my new condo and support me very comfortably for the rest of my life. You won't be getting an inheritance from me because I plan to spend every penny on my own happiness. You're doing this to punish me." "No, sweetheart. I'm doing this to save myself. There's a difference." The real estate market in Springfield was hot that summer, and my house sold within 2 weeks to a young couple who reminded me of David and Robert when we'd first bought the place. They were so excited, so full of dreams and plans. I hoped their love would last longer than ours had. While the sale was going through, I flew to Phoenix to finalize the purchase of my condo. It was in a beautiful community called Desert Springs, designed specifically for active adults over 55. The condo itself was small but bright, with large windows that looked out over the mountains and a little patio where I could grow flowers year-round. But what really sold me on the place was the community. There was a book club, a gardening group, water aerobics classes, bridge tournaments and movie nights. The people I met during my visit were friendly, welcoming and genuinely interested in getting to know me. For the first time in years, I felt like I could have a future that didn't revolve around waiting for phone calls that never came. The day before I left Springfield forever, I did one last thing. I drove to the cemetery where Robert was buried and had a long conversation with his headstone. "I know you'd probably want me to try harder with David," I told him. "I know you always believed that family should forgive each other, should work things out no matter what. But Bobby, our son has become someone we wouldn't recognize. He's cruel and selfish and he sees me as nothing more than a burden to be disposed of. I can't keep loving someone who doesn't love me back. It's killing me." I sat there in the quiet of the cemetery, surrounded by the graves of people who'd lived full lives in this little Missouri town, and I made peace with my decision. Robert would understand eventually. He'd raised David too, and if he could see what our son had become, he'd want me to choose my own happiness over trying to change someone who didn't want to be changed. David called me one more time before I left, but I let it go to voicemail. His message was brief and telling. "Mom, I just want you to know that if you go through with this move, if you sell the house and take all that money to Arizona, we probably won't be able to stay in touch very much. Jessica and I are planning to start a family soon, and we'll be focused on our own lives. I hope you understand." I saved that message. Not because it hurt me, but because it was finally, completely honest. David was telling me that if I didn't give him access to my money, he'd cut off all contact forever. He was showing me exactly who he was, and I was grateful for the clarity. The moving truck came on a Thursday morning in late August. I'd sold or donated most of my furniture, keeping only the pieces that meant something to me personally. Robert's favorite chair, my grandmother's china cabinet, the photo albums full of pictures from when David was little and still loved me. Mrs. Chin and Mrs. Patterson came over to say goodbye, both of them crying like I was their own daughter leaving home. "You're so brave, Margaret," Mrs. Chin said, hugging me tightly. "I wish I had your courage." "It's not courage," I told her. "It's just survival. When you're drowning, you have to swim to shore, even if it's not the shore you plan to reach." The drive to Arizona took me 3 days. I made it a celebration rather than a mourning, stopping at interesting places along the way, eating at local diners, staying in clean motels and watching the landscape change from Missouri green to desert gold. For the first time in years I felt free. My new neighbors in Desert Springs welcomed me like I'd been their friend forever. Betty and Harold from next door helped me unpack boxes. Susan from across the courtyard brought me homemade cookies. Tom and Linda down the hall invited me to join their weekly dinner group. Within a month I had more social invitations than I'd had in years. I joined the book club and discovered I loved mystery novels. I took up watercolor painting and found out I had a talent for landscapes. I started playing bridge and made friends with 3 other women who met every Tuesday for lunch and gossip. I even began dating, something I never thought I'd do again after Robert. His name was Frank, and he was a widower from Chicago who'd moved to Desert Springs 2 years earlier. He was kind, funny, and genuinely interested in my thoughts and opinions. When I told him about David, about the heartbreak that had brought me to Arizona, he held my hand and said, "His loss, Margaret. Any man who doesn't treasure his mother is a fool." 6 months after I moved to Arizona, I got a birth announcement in the mail. David and Jessica had had a baby, a little boy they'd named Robert after his grandfather. There was no personal note, just the printed announcement with their address label. I looked at the photo of the baby, a beautiful child who looked exactly like David had at that age, and I felt something I didn't expect. Not the overwhelming urge to reconcile, not the desperate desire to be part of their lives again, but a kind of peaceful sadness. Sadness for the grandmother I'd never get to be, for the relationship this little boy would never have with me, for the love that David was so determined to reject. But I didn't feel regret for my choices. I sent a card with a savings bond for baby Robert, not because I expected thanks or recognition, but because it was the right thing to do. Then I went on with my new life. A year later, Betty mentioned that she'd heard from her daughter in Missouri that there was a young family in Springfield struggling financially, something about the husband losing his job and them having trouble with their mortgage. She didn't know their names, but the description sounded familiar. I didn't ask for details. David had made his choices and I'd made mine. Now, as I sit here in my little condo watching the Arizona sunset paint the mountains purple and gold, I want to tell you something important. For those of you who've made it this far in my story, who've listened to an old woman's tale of heartbreak and healing, thank you. And if you're facing something similar in your own life, if you have a child or a family member who's decided you're not worth their time or love, please hear this. You are not responsible for other people's choices, even when those people are your own children. You can love someone with every fiber of your being, sacrifice everything for their happiness and give them every opportunity in life, and they can still choose to walk away from you. That choice says nothing about your worth as a person and everything about their character. I spent 68 years believing that being a good mother meant accepting whatever treatment my child chose to give me. I thought love meant never giving up, never walking away, never putting my own needs first. I was wrong. Real love, healthy love, requires respect on both sides. It requires consideration, kindness, and genuine care for each other's well-being. When someone consistently shows you that they don't respect you, don't value you, and don't want you in their life, believing them the first time can save you years of heartache. I don't know what David's life looks like now. I don't know if he's happy or struggling, if he ever thinks about me, or if he's convinced himself that cutting me out of his life was completely justified. What I know is that I'm happier now than I've been since Robert died, maybe happier than I've been in decades. I have friends who call me just to chat, who invite me to dinners and movies and weekend trips. I have hobbies that bring me joy and activities that challenge me. I have a life that's entirely my own, built on my own choices and filled with people who actually want me around. Some stories don't have happy endings where families reunite and love conquers all. Sometimes the happy ending is learning to love yourself enough to walk away from people who don't appreciate you, even when those people share your blood. If you're watching this and you're in a situation like mine was, I want you to know that it's okay to choose yourself. It's okay to stop trying to earn love from people who've decided you're not worth it. It's okay to build a new life with people who see your value and celebrate your presence in their world. David taught me the most painful lesson of my life, but also the most liberating one. He showed me that I could survive losing the love I thought I couldn't live without. More than survive, I could thrive. And if a 68-year-old woman from Missouri can start over in the Arizona desert and build a beautiful new life, then anybody can. The question isn't whether you're strong enough to do it. The question is whether you love yourself enough to try. Thank you for listening to my story. If it's helped you in any way, please share it with someone who might need to hear it. Sometimes the most important thing we can do for each other is prove that we're not alone in our struggles, and that there's always hope for a better tomorrow if we're brave enough to reach for it. My name is Margaret Thompson, and I want you to know that your life is worth fighting for, even if the people you thought would fight beside you have chosen to walk away. Especially then.